strategies that the translator uses while translating. So, how does a translator translate, or which book he or she translates, and why the translator translates, are the questions which are cultural in their origin, and they are ideological questions. So, translation is no longer just a literary activity or a library activity sitting with a dictionary, but it's also an ideological and political activity. And we are discussing Gandhiji's Sarvodaya, and Sarvodaya was translated at the moment of nationalist struggle rising in India. And John Ruskin's criticism of Western capitalism was something that appealed to Gandhiji so much that he used it as part of his own struggle for freedom in India. So, translation of Ruskin's Unto This Last as Sarvodaya is a political act through and through. And not just that, it has got a great impact on Indian society. So, these are the questions which contemporary translation studies actually addresses.
One of the issues regarding the choice of the text, how it becomes political, is, for example, why all the novels and all the books, prize winner books, they are easily translated.
Exactly.
In the sense they are fastly translated. So you have all books getting Nobel Prize win or Booker Prize. They are getting translated just because of this whole idea of popularity.
Right.
There are so many books which are better than those prize winning books, but they don't get translated.
Very important point, Vishal. Means commercial aspect is also extremely important in study of translation. It's not just political, as we discussed in Gandhiji.
Yes.
For example, Booker Prize winners or Nobel Prize winners are immediately translated because of the commercial value, because these people have already got popularity. So people who assign translations feel that you can make money out of it. So commercial reasons are also extremely important forces which govern translation.
Exactly.
So translation is not just something that you sit down and do with a dictionary, but there are many calculations and lot of agendas behind translation.
Exactly.
And these are the agendas that contemporary translation studies is interested in.
Exactly. For example, I'm reminded of this whole idea of how Nobel Prize winner writers and how Booker Prize winner writers, they find spaces in the front pages of literary magazines. Let's say Gujarati magazines are full of such quotations. That is how their sensibility and the aesthetics of Gujarati criticism is defined or actually affected by the Western models of aesthetics and poetics.
Right. And even commerce goes hand in hand with
Commerce
that.
goes hand.
That is this complex relationship between ideological in the sense of political and in the sense of commercial, and how it mixes with literary is something very fascinating, and it becomes very open in translation. Something that goes on in hiding. The agendas which usually in study of literature are hidden. Comes out in forefront in translation. And for example, you have mentioned how Booker Prize winners, even look at pulp fiction and popular fiction, and you might think of Paulo Coelho's Alchemist being translated because it has got commercial value, because it's popular in English, it's available on streets in a pirated version. People are eager to translate it into Gujarati.
And actually the popularity of Paulo Coelho affected translated in the sense there was already a translation available as entitled as Kimiagaro. But as the novel got so much of popularity, somebody again translated it
into as Alchemist.
Yes.
Right. So these are very interesting questions. Let's move further in our discussion. And what are we going to look at? Is various approaches.
Approaches. Some of the significant contemporary approaches to translation are descriptive translation studies associated with hidden theory, rewriting or manipulation school associated with André Lefebvre, and Theo Hermans, and the polysystem approach associated with Itamar Ivan Zohar.
Right, so I think these are important theorists and approaches which have evolved after 70s, and that is what makes them evolve. It is only after 1970s that these approaches became very popular and became very increasingly important to the study of translation. And you have mentioned DTS or descriptive translation studies here with Gideon Turry. Now, Gideon Turry is a very important theorist for today, and what he studies is what people call translation, not what is translation. And so he is also interested in questions like pseudo translations. Pseudo translations are those books which are sold as they are as if they are translations, but they are not.
They are not.
Means, for example, I might publish a book saying that this is collection of Scandinavian short stories, but they are written by me. The author is fictional, and in order to sell my book and get popularity, what I do is I invent an author who doesn't exist. So these kind of translations are called pseudo translations.
Pseudo translations, yes.
And pseudo translations also tell us a lot about our culture and literary politics. So this is a very fascinating way of looking at it. And what you mentioned about canon is reflected in Manipulation School by André Lefebvre and Theo Hermans. The translation is a form of manipulation of literary fame.
Exactly.
That's the title of the book by Lefebvre, Translation and Manipulation of Literary Fame. So how translation play a role in manipulating literary fame is what people are interested in. So let's move further.
Yes. Many contemporary approaches like the post-colonial approach to translation and cultural studies approach to translation see translation as an ideological activity involving politics of representation which can only be understood in its social, cultural and historical context.
Right. So what we can see right now in today's contemporary translation theory is that the focus is on the context of translation.
Yes.
Right, the context rather than the process of translation. So, and how context actually shapes, determines the process and the strategies. So how you will translate depends on the context in which you are translating.
Exactly.
What is the intention behind translation? Right. So if somebody asks me how to translate this, the answer would be why do you want to translate it?
Exactly.
Right. That will give you how.
Yes.
Why will give you how. So translation studies today is interested in whys and how they have shaped the hows of translation. So that is what it means. Let's move further. And here there is mention of post-colonial approach to translation studies. And what we mean by post-colonial is a branch of study which is interested in the questions of colonial history and its impact on colonized history.
Exactly.
Right, that is what post-colonial studies often does. And as you rightly mentioned about role of translations.
Role of translation.
And translations have played a very important role during colonial period, as well as it has played a role in fighting against colonialism, as Gandhiji's Sarvodaya does. So that's the irony. Means John Ruskin is a British writer, and Gandhiji is translating John Ruskin to fight against the British.
So
right? That's a very
political act.
very ironical and lot of contradictions in the whole
Involved in that.
So that makes post-colonial approach very fascinating.
Exactly.
So let's move further in this debate.
The rejection of the idea that translation is secondary or inferior to original and the assumption that translation can be understood only in its cultural and historical context are central to contemporary translation studies. Okay, so we are actually moving from prescriptive translation studies to descriptive.
Exactly.
In that sense.
Right. And one idea comes to my mind is the idea of Ramayana that Vishal we were discussing some time back. And there are multiple Ramayans at work. And we have Tulsidas Ramayana. Ramcharitmanas, and if you look at it, then it is actually not a translation of Valmiki Ramayana, but it is something which is rewritten, retelling of the Rama story. So rewriting, retelling of things have their own context.
Exactly.
And what Tulsidas is doing, that he is addressing society of his time, not the society of Valmiki's time, and he has that society in mind when he writes Ramcharitmanas. And his knowledge of contemporary society and his own agenda of improving or freeing his own society is at the back of his adaptation, rewriting or retelling of the Ramayana story.
So here the context becomes very crucial and very problematic also.
Right.
And another issue that comes to my mind right now is contemporary translation studies. It has changed the existing vocabulary of discussing about translation.
Exactly.
For example, earlier we used to discuss in terms of source language, target language, encoding, decoding.
Right.
Now this retelling, rewriting,
Rewriting.
they are the new register, the entirely new register of
Exactly. So that is, I think, vocabulary and terminology of contemporary translation studies. And this shift in vocabulary indicates shift in perspective on
Perspectives,
translation.
yes.
Yeah, you are very right in this. So let's move further in our discussion. Point that is to be kept in mind, that's what are the central things in contemporary translation studies. The idea that translation is not inferior. In fact, Valmiki's Ramcharitmanas is not an inferior version of Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas is not an inferior version of Valmiki's Ramayana,
but co-version,
but a co-version, a parallel version, and a retelling.
retelling.
Right? We have Gujarati translation of Ramayana, which you might is not exactly a translation but a retelling.
Retelling.
of
We have
Nakar.
we have tribal versions of Ramayana.
Right,
We have
right.
women's Ramayana.
Yeah.
And even South, I've read somewhere there's Muslim Ramayana also.
Right.
So these are retelling and not inferior in any context.
Exactly. These are re-narrations, and they have their importance in their context.
Context.
And these are the questions that contemporary translation studies is interested in. So let's move further.
Contemporary translation studies also provide an interesting critical perspective on translation. For example, Mahashweta Sen Gupta points out how in Gitanjali, Rabindranath Tagore took immense liberties with his own Bengali originals to suit the English sensibility. He modified, omitted, and rewrote his poems to cater to his Victorian audience.
Right. So when Tagore is translating his own versions, and because it's his own works, he takes a lot of liberties with them. And what he is doing, Mahashweta Sen Gupta points out that it has an agenda at the back.
Exactly.
Right? He is not doing just because of his creative freedom. But he has an agenda, and the agenda is that what he is translating has to appeal to the Victorian audience, the audience of his time. So his translation look very Victorian.
So he's keeping in mind what effect it will create to the
Right.
audience.
So he has an agenda and a purpose of making his own works actually cater to the audience out there in the West. So he is playing to the gallery in some way
Exactly.
when he is translating or rewriting Gitanjali. And that's a very fascinating way of looking at it. And this kind of way of looking at it is, I think, a move ahead from the traditional questions of translation,
translations,
like
yes.
how to translate or whether translation is possible or not. So we have gone beyond these questions.
Exactly. So Tagore, the entire act of Tagore is cannot be considered innocent.
Exactly. So commercial and political issues and agendas, hidden or explicitly stated or hidden agendas, are always governing translation activity, as they govern most of our cultural activities. So that is what we have to keep in mind.
It examines fascinating cultural phenomenon like pseudo translation or reverse translation. And here is a very wonderful example. I know. So would you like to?
Yeah. The example is, for instance, it can examine cases like a song from Tagore's Gitanjali, which was translated from Bengali to English by Tagore himself. Then Pablo Neruda liked it so much that he translated it and made it into one of the poems of his very famous book called 20 Poems of Love and Despair, 20 Songs of Love and Despair, his earliest collection. So this poem becomes a part of Pablo Neruda's collection of poems. And then what happens, this collection becomes so popular that from Spanish it's translated into English, and from English Bengalis loved Pablo Neruda's poetry, and they translated Tagore's poem, which existed in English now, into Bengali. So a poem from Bengali goes into English, from English it goes to Spanish, from Spanish it goes back again into English, and from English it goes back again into Bengali. So this is what is called reverse translation, back into the same language. And this is a very fascinating journey of a poem.
Exactly.
And it's a unique example for students of translation studies, that what are the shifts, what are the politics, what are the commercial and ideological pressures, agendas, hidden agendas behind such kind of happenings, such kind of phenomenons. And this is what makes translation studies very exciting.
Very exciting. And here translation becomes a space through which text travels.
Right.
They travel across the world.
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
we can here the comparative studies comes into the picture.
Right.
There can be a lot of comparisons.
Exactly.
Not only of what is original, what is authentic, but the politics of the translation.
Yeah, yeah. And for example, students of English literature know Chaucer, but they are not aware that some of the stories from Panchatantra have gone into Chaucer stories, and they have traveled from Panchatantra in Sanskrit to Chaucer's English through translations from Arabics. Arabs came to India and translated a lot, and they went and they took a lot of rich stuff from India, and from Arabic they were translated into other European languages like English and French and German, and from there it entered English literature.
Exactly.
And so we are students of Chaucer, but we don't know that one of the stories.
Chaucer was our student in that sense. And that is why there are so many similarities amongst Panchtantra, Zen stories, Arabian Nights, or Bishop's Tale, fables. So, in terms of plot.
Exactly, and this is also because of spread of Buddhism and Arabs coming to India. What happened in Buddhism was Buddhism, like Christianity, spread by converting people, and in order to convert people, you have to convert your own book in their language. And so, what happened that many Buddhist Pali texts were translated into Tibetan languages and other languages, and that's how it spread. So translation can tell us a lot about history of our civilization, and that is why contemporary translation studies is very important. So let's go move ahead here.
So, if you look at it from a feminist perspective, the Lori Chamberlain draws attention to the gender bias behind the belief that translation is like a woman unfaithful when pretty and not beautiful when faithful. She says that fidelity is defined as an implicit contract between translation as woman and original as husband, father, or author. No? So this is looking at the feminist perspective. However, the infamous double standard operates here as it might have in traditional marriages. The unfaithful wife, that is translation, is publicly tried for crimes the husband or original is by law incapable of committing. This contract, in short, makes it impossible for original to be guilty of infidelity.
So this is something very interesting.